Martha and I like to linger in bed for a few minutes every morning after the alarm goes off. After so many years, we knew what was best for us. Those warm, lazy extra minutes in bed must be paid for by a desperate struggle to get ready for work. A few years ago, the reckoning also included a mad dash to get kids ready for school. Now that our 2 children are gone, we find ourselves lingering in bed more and more often before the mad morning rush that precedes the drive to work. To make matters worse, I had to leave the house a good 20 minutes earlier than usual. Martha had to work late tonight, so instead of taking my car, we work close to each other, so we ride to work together. I decided to ride my mountain bike to work. The weather forecast also predicted a gorgeous spring day. I took the last bite of toast, washed it down with coffee, and was ready to go. "I'm on my way, honey," I shouted towards the bathroom, where Martha was still busy. I waited for her to stick her head out the door and talk to me, but I heard no answer. "See you tonight?" "I love you," I added after a few seconds. I was late and didn't have time to think about Martha's lack of response. I threw the keys into my backpack and went out. "I'm Frank McKay, a 53-year-old office manager for the State Department of Public Works. My wife, Martha, 49, works as an administrative assistant in the main office of a manufacturing company. We're both better than average-looking, but Martha is dazzling, if I may say so myself. She does not look her age. Many men look in her direction when we go out. 10 minutes later, I heard the whistle telling me I had received a text message. A few seconds later, my phone rang. It's hard enough to keep track of all the cars while cycling, and I didn't talk on the phone while driving. I answered calls at work. I got to work on time, but was so busy getting properly dressed for the 8:45 a.m. meeting that I left my cell phone in my backpack, forgetting about all the phone calls. Later, I followed a group of colleagues to lunch. Finally, during my afternoon coffee break, I remembered the phone calls. I had 5 messages from Martha, 2 messages, and 3 voicemails. The first text message was sent at 8:10 and read, "You took the wrong keys. Call me." The second message was sent at 8:35. "I'm waiting for your call." Then I listened to the voicemail. The first message was left at 8:11. "Hey, honey, you took the wrong set of keys when you left. Could you drop them off for me at work this morning? I need them. Call me." Her voice was a little harsh, and I didn't understand why. She doesn't need them. Keys at work. They use a modern key card security system. The second voicemail was left around 10:15 a.m. "What are you doing, Dave? I've been waiting for the keys all morning. Call me. I have more important things to do than just wait for you. I have known Martha for over 25 years, 23 years as my wife. It was obvious to me that she was royally angry. Anger and contempt oozed from every word. Before listening to her last voicemail, I took my keys out of my backpack and placed them on the table. I listened to the last message left at 12:55. "Where are you? I'm still waiting for my keys. I don't know what you were thinking about this morning, but I wish I had them on my desk this afternoon." This time Martha did not hold back her anger. She almost screamed. I was stunned. Recently, I began to get used to the fact that Martha was angry with me over trifles. As she approaches 50, I thought that perhaps she was going through changes in her body that were causing her to act strangely. This was the explanation she gave me when I pointed out her change in behavior. She rebuked me when I asked her to see a doctor for hormone treatment or whatever they do for menopause. Life with Martha has recently become very difficult. Our relationship has been strained. But it was strange to see such an outburst over a set of keys that she didn't need. I worked on myself. I think the two can play a game of anger. I decided not to call her, but just wait until 5 o'clock to drop off the damn keys. Shortly after 5, I arrived at Martha's workplace. Surprise, surprise, I was just in time to see her pull out of the parking lot and head home. Despite the heavy traffic and the ability of my bike, I was never able to catch up with her. In any case, there was no use in doing this, since we were both returning home. I knew she would soon be out of heavy traffic and picking up a speed I couldn't match, so I decided to take my usual more direct route to try and beat her home. A few minutes later, I was taken by surprise when I saw her car heading to another area of the city. This was an easier route for me. I can take a shortcut through the park, but definitely not the best route for Martha. She turned onto A street lined with two-story duplexes and parked at the curb. I became suspicious, so I slowed down, watching her from afar as she walked up the stairs and rang the doorbell, typing a text on her phone. Even from where I stood in front of my bike, I heard her message ring. She read the message, returned to her car, and drove away. What the hell happened? I asked myself. Marta, who had to work late, arrived at an unknown apartment. I grabbed the set of keys I was holding in my hands to take a closer look. I recognized her car keys and our house keys. However, there was another clue that I didn't recognize. I had a feeling that this was the key that Martha was missing. I walked up to the duplex, walked up the stairs, inserted the key into the front door lock, and turned it. The click of the lock marked the end of my marriage to Martha. I didn't open the door. I needed to think. What should I do? My growing anger made it tempting to enter my wife's lover's apartment and destroy his things. Or I could wait for him and beat the crap out of him. Or I could just go to the police station and go straight to jail. No, blind anger was not the right answer, but I had to do something. I looked into the apartment. Technically, I was committing trespassing, but if I had rushed, I wouldn't have been caught. The first thing I saw was neatly folded mail on a small table in the hallway. I grabbed the phone bill. The letter was addressed to Steve Mueller. I had no idea who it was, but the phone bill might come in handy. I put it in my backpack. There was enough information for now. I didn't want to get caught spying in someone else's apartment, so I got the hell out of there. Instead of heading home, I drove to a nearby hardware store. Within minutes, I had a duplicate key. I expected Martha to be home, but her car was not in the driveway. I didn't know what her lover had written to her, but it had to be a message to meet him somewhere else. I decided to play a little with Martha. I called her, but she didn't answer. I didn't leave a text message, but I did send her a voicemail. I'm late too, but I'll bring the keys soon. I'll be in your office soon. It took a few seconds to get a response. It is not necessary. I took other measures. I just left my office. Just go home, was her immediate response. In her head, she probably added, and leave me alone, dumbass. I had a shitty evening. Martha returned home only at 10 o'clock. This gave me a good 4 hours to decide what to do. First, I wanted evidence of her cheating. With the copy I now had on my keychain, it would have been a piece of cake to do what I needed to do. The phone bill was indicative of her lover in itself. They constantly talked on the phone and texted each other, even in the evenings when Martha and I were together. All this time I thought that she was corresponding with our children. Do I really need to know why she decided to leave me? No. It didn't matter now. Our love has faded over the past 6 months. It may take so much indifference, reproaches, and nagging before a man's love begins to fade. I now realized that my loving wife was moving away from our marriage, but I never knew it. Today's revelation was the final blow to a very shitty marriage. We're done. In our state, there is no benefit to proving adultery. Irreconcilable differences would be the motive, and the judge would split our assets 50-50. But as a betrayed husband, I felt I had a lot to achieve to regain some of my pride. I won't let Martha lie while she's married. The reason will be made public to our children, parents, and friends. Knowing how much Martha has changed over the past few months, I wouldn't be surprised if she tried to somehow make me the bad guy. I did play with a lot of revenge scenarios, but decided not to go down that route. I only had a few years until early retirement, and I didn't want to mess it up. Retirement wouldn't have been what I imagined all those years ago when I lived with Martha, but it was better than going to jail and losing my job. Now at least I will enjoy my retirement the way I wanted, not the way Martha wanted. I decided to face Martha's annoyance when she returned from her date so that it would work in my favor. Her anger may lead to a small argument and will excuse my icy behavior over the next few days. However, sex with Steve must have calmed her down a bit. Now that I was paying attention, I realized that she was averting my eyes a little. When Martha finally returned home, she was surprised to see me still sitting in the living room. She tossed the spare car key into the container we keep by the door and grabbed her own set of keys that I had put there earlier. She glanced at the keys and threw them into her purse. I expected some grumbling, but she didn't say a single word. She headed straight to the bathroom. "I'm tired," she said to someone in the corridor. "I'll take a shower and go straight to bed." "What?" I asked. "No love tonight?" Her only response was to close the bathroom door behind her and lock it. Do you know a lot of married people who lock their bathroom door? I hadn't noticed this before, but it happened often when Martha returned from working late. Oh my God, I was so stupid. No wonder she's leaving me. Before going to bed, I watched the evening show. I hoped Martha was fast asleep. I swear she was still awake. Sleep was eluding her too. The next morning, under the pretext of a meeting, I left early in my car. Instead of working, I went to an online store and bought some interesting things. It only took me a couple of hours to connect Miller's apartment to sound and video. Having been in the apartment for so long, I had time to look around. It was very well furnished. Many of the items looked like antiques. I don't know if he had a maid, but his apartment was spotless. Not a speck of dust to be seen anywhere. I wonder if he was obsessed with cleanliness. This was food for thought. I was hoping my little spy gear would go undetected for a few days, at least long enough to get some juicy footage from my wife and her lover. I shouldn't have worried about that. Returning to the office after lunch, I received another message from Martha, in which she asked me not to wait for her since she had another late meeting. I made an appointment with a lawyer the next day. That evening, I drove past Mueller's apartment and saw Martha's car. Despite everything I'd been through in the last 24 hours, I still felt like my heart was drowning with yet another proof of her betrayal. Tomorrow will be a decisive day. I drove back to the house. I was tempted to just check into a motel in town, but it would be ridiculous to go to such an expense when it wasn't my fault. When I got home, I thought about spending the night in the guest bedroom, but again I decided that I wasn't the one who ruined our marriage. Let Martha sleep there. I moved all her things into the guest bedroom in disarray. I would just grab whole drawers, dump them on the bed, and then take clothes off her side of the closet and throw them in there. Overall, a very calming activity. I felt better with every armful I carried into her room. When she returned home that evening, she looked worse than the night before. She had the post-sex look she might have after a 5-hour sex fest. And again, she was surprised to see me. She did not explain her lateness or appearance, as if she could explain the reason. I couldn't believe I could cause such pain. Knowing that the threat of divorce was looming over us, I grabbed her hand and dragged her towards the bedrooms. "What are you doing, Frank?" "You're hurting me," she whined. I forced myself to sound more confident than I felt. I knew I was minutes away from losing her. I had to act quickly. I had to control myself. "Shut up, bitch," I said loudly. It was so out of character for me to say things like I had hit her. Suddenly, the accusing looks I had been receiving for the past months were replaced by fear. But what kind of fear? Fear of violence or fear of exposure? I had no way of knowing and wasn't going to ask. I opened the guest bedroom so she could see her things stacked there. "Starting tonight, bitch," I said sharply. "Is it your room?" And I pushed her inside. "We are no longer husband and wife. Stay away from me." I warned her. In fact, it would be better if you just packed your things and left right now. Martha was irritated and angry. She struggled, trying to leave the room. "Oh no, bastard! If any of us sleeps in the guest room, it's you," she said. "I broke my back taking care of the kids, you in the house. Show some respect or leave the house." Did I want to argue with her? "No!" I pushed her forcefully back into the guest room, surprising us both with the force of my action. "I'm giving you 2 options," I growled at her. "Either you sleep here until our divorce is final, or you go live with Steve Mueller right now." His name hit her like a karate chop. Despite her behavior in recent months, Martha still knew me better than anyone. She realized that I knew about her betrayal, and she knew that I had no forgiveness. She knew that I would never accept her back into my life, and we would not part as friends. Who wants to be friends with someone who stabbed you in the back? I could see in her eyes that she didn't expect to get caught, and she wasn't prepared for confrontation. Within seconds, I saw defeat written all over her face. She backed into the bedroom, took off her clothes, and sat on the bed. Tears slowly rolled down her cheeks. She said something that I didn't hear. "What?" I barked. "Sorry," she said a little louder. "I was so stupid. Please don't hate me." "You know me, Martha," I said. "I won't hate you after a while, but I'm sure I won't love you either. Damn, I don't know if I can just be around you." I started to close the door, but I wanted to hurt her a little more. "I'd rather do it quickly," I said decisively. "I would appreciate it if you left as soon as possible. Just sign the divorce papers you'll receive soon, and we'll never have to meet again." I closed the door, speaking to Martha one last time before the trial. The last sound I heard was her sobs. The next day, I picked up my spy equipment from Miller's apartment. Next stop was my lawyer. Since my demands were simple, he assured me that the divorce papers could be delivered within 2 days. I paid him an advance and left. I tried to get back to work, but it was more than useless. I finally explained my predicament to my boss, who told me to take a few days off. I drove home, but when I arrived, I saw Martha in the process of moving, and I parked down the street. From the video I watched, I recognized Steve Miller helping her. I had the urge to beat him, but the extra 3 inches and 40 pounds he had against me made it more of a wish than a possibility. I left. Later that evening, I felt for the first time the real impact of Martha's betrayal. My anger disappeared, replaced by loneliness like I had never experienced. Divorce would have been more traumatic if our children were still living with us. What was a blessing was also a curse, as I had no one to turn to for comfort. My parents died, my brother and sister lived on the other side of the country. I decided to contact my 2 daughters. I was surprised to hear that Martha had not yet contacted them. She called and wrote to them constantly in college. I think it was easier for her to lie to me than to her children. A few weeks ago, if someone had asked me about proper behavior towards a cheated spouse, I would advocate prudence, keeping the peace, and respecting 23 years of devotion as a mother and wife. Now suffering, desperate for love or at least sympathy, I told my 2 daughters, Mandy and Tess. I felt good knowing that neither of them doubted me when I told them their mother cheated on me, left me for another man. For a moment, I thought they might have known about their mother, but they were very upset by the news, and I dismissed the thought. My barely controlled sobs also helped convince them. Their understanding was a great comfort to me. I made a big mistake that day. By the time I finished calling the kids, I had already drunk 1 full bottle of wine. I'm not a big drinker. Martha and I might drink 1 or 2 bottles of wine a week, and sometimes 6 bottles of beer. The mistake wasn't the drinking. It was alcohol-induced self-pity. When faced with failure, a man must take responsibility for such failure, but try as I might, I could not understand what I had done to push Martha away. My work has never been an obstacle to my family life. I didn't have to travel maybe once every 5 years for retraining. My overtime work was limited to a few fixed periods per year. To be honest, I've probably let myself go a little over the last few years since I turned 50, but I was in no way overweight or out of shape. Miller didn't seem much younger or in better shape than me. I wondered if he was a better lover, an area in which my knowledge was rather meager. I didn't have much experience before I met Martha, only 4 friends between the ages of 18 and 28, and Martha and I had a lot to learn together after we met. I don't think Martha abandoned me for social status either. His apartment did not seem outlandish. His pieces of furniture showed more than anything else, but he was not the father. We were probably in the same income group. As I curled up in the fetal position for the night, it occurred to me that there was no good reason why she left, only that I was who I was. Can you struggle with being yourself? Can I stop existing so that everything will be okay? My call the next morning came at about 10 o'clock. I picked up the phone without looking at the caller ID. "You son of a bitch!" Martha screamed. "You shouldn't have been so rude to Mandy and Tess." For a second, I wanted to just hang up, but part of me wanted a confrontation so this whole nightmare could be put behind me. "How rude, honey?" I asked. "The fact that you cheated on me for months, or how you moved in with your lover? Or is it all of the above? There was only silence. I hate silence. Martha, there's a part of me that still loves you, I said. I won't say whether it's my feminine part or my masculine part, maybe my stupid part, but there is one thing I will never do: lie to our family. You won't dare, she begged. Not Dad, please. Watch me, I said, and hung up. My finger hovered over the speed dial button for Martha's father, but I didn't press it. Harvey has been miserable since his wife died of breast cancer 2 years ago. He was a very good man, but at 80 years old, his health was a little fragile. I think his will to live was a little weak. Today, of course, I could understand it, and he was a good man. I might as well let him die in peace instead of ruining his life because of his daughter's behavior. My anger was receding. I decided to inform Martha of my decision. I took Mueller's phone bill and dialed the number on it. A male voice answered. I hesitated for a second. Martha McKay, please, I asked. There was silence on the line for a moment. I heard someone crying in the background, obviously Martha. Who's asking? Asked Mueller. Her father, you fucking piece of shit, I lied, unable to contain the wave of indignation. Oh, and forget about talking to her. Just tell my daughter not to call me. Forget I exist, and leave my grandchildren, my son-in-law, and me alone. Bye, idiot. Less than a minute later, feeling a little remorseful, I dialed Martha's cell phone number. She answered almost immediately, but didn't say anything. She was still hiccuping from tears. Hello, Martha. I broke the silence. Did you have a great day? Frank, why? She asked. Why did you tell my father? This will destroy him. He has been in such poor health lately. You knew that. Hey, don't shift the blame, bitch, I said, since such an insult was difficult to utter. It wasn't your father who talked on the phone with your asshole. It was me. I love your father, and I know that you would kill him with your behavior. I want to emphasize something here. Are you listening to me? Yes, she said. I'm listening to it. Don't ever let that guy come between me and my girls, or your father will find out everything about you. All the gross details, as you put it correctly, I told her. Don't think I'm joking. I trusted you most of my adult life. I didn't know it was possible, but you broke that trust. I'm repeating myself, but I have to fight with myself not to just shoot you on the spot. I have a lot of hatred in my heart for you, and that is what defines me at this moment. Understood? Yes, she finally said between sobs. Mark, she sobbed. I'm really sorry. I never wanted this. Me too, I answered, and he hung up. 6 months later, I received official papers declaring the official end of my marriage. I had recovered from my bout of depression, but there was still something missing in my life. I couldn't figure out what exactly. I dated a few women but didn't get very far. They probably found out that I had a lot of baggage. I had a one-night stand with a work friend who was divorced like me. Sex seemed empty without love and affection. We were just two adults desperate for relief, but it left me feeling worse alone than before. One evening, returning from work, I finally had an epiphany. After moving into my new apartment, we sold the house to split the proceeds. I said hello to a new friend who appeared 2 weeks ago. Hello, Jack, I said, looking behind the door. I was reminiscing about my single days, naming the dust bunnies that accumulated everywhere in my home, mostly behind doors and under my bed. Jack stood at the front door while Roger and Bugs lived under the bed. I was almost ready to pick up the vacuum cleaner in the closet, embarrassed by the thought that Mueller would never have left his apartment in such a state. I realized that I still hated this guy. I also realized what was missing in my life was getting even with him and Martha. Of course, for a while, I thought a good beating was in order, but prison didn't appeal to me. I realized that I would never be able to move on unless I found at least a small measure of revenge. I spent the evening cleaning the apartment and thinking about revenge. Jack being sucked into the vacuum was a revelation. I had my own plan. The following Friday, I followed Martha and Miller to the pub. While they were inside, I installed a GPS tracker on his car. They sat down at a table, and I sat on a stool. from which I could watch Martha in the mirror behind the bar. A few minutes later, she noticed me and said something to Muller. He looked in my direction. I placed the bill on the counter and walked out of the bar, pretending to be unaware of their presence. I'm pretty sure he would recognize me by now. Over the next few weeks, I made several visits to Miller's apartment, monitoring his movements. He usually had a quick lunch at a restaurant near his work. One day I went there with a friend whom I instructed on what to say. We sat down at a table next to Muller. We ordered lunch and started chatting. "So," my friend Terry asked, at my signal, "how lonely is life? Do you miss your ex?" "Well, it was difficult at first," I answered. "Martha really took me by surprise. She has always been a good liar throughout our life together, but she really led me astray on this matter." "What does a good liar mean?" my friend asked. "Did she lie a lot?" "Well, not often, but enough to recognize it as a personality flaw," I said. "For example, 3 years ago, her car was dirty, so she borrowed my car to go to a meeting. She returned in the evening with a large dent on the driver's door. She argued with me that this was the case in the morning when she took it. I washed the car the day before and knew full well that this was not the case. However, after 25 years, you learn to allow these things to happen to your wife." "How is your personal life?" asked Terry. "That's one of the good things about getting rid of that bitch," I said. "I have 2 friends with benefits, without any obligations, and at least 10 years younger than Martha. I'm very glad I got rid of it. You know the saying, once a cheater, always a cheater. But let's talk about something else. What do you think of Seahawks?" We ended lunch analyzing the Seahawks' chances of making it to the Super Bowl. The next day, again at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I went to Muller. These days I have started having late lunches. I took my checklist and read the remaining items. Leaving the tap dripping. Check. Leave the ceiling fan on in the bathroom. Check move forks, spoons, and knives in their drawer. Check move a few pots and pans. Check take a red toothbrush, Martha's color all these years, and leave it on the sink. Check I took the cup and placed it under the tap to wet it. I then took the cup and left it on the clean coffee table in the living room. After a few minutes, I was sure that she had left a mark on his antique table. Another day, I turned on the coffee pot, then turned on the ceiling fan again, sprinkled some cigarette ash at the base of the toilet. I also took a porcelain trinket from the living room, broke it in a paper bag, and left a small shard of ceramic on the floor. Everything was done within 1 month. I regretted that I no longer had spy equipment in my apartment to see how things were going between lovers. However, my children kept in touch with their mother. I never asked them about her, but they would occasionally drop tidbits of information. It was Mandy who first told me that things were a little tense between Martha and Muller. It's time to turn up the heat a little between the 2 lovers. One day, a friend tripped while walking past Muller and, accidentally, left a mark of lipstick on his shirt and blonde hair on his shoulder. Martha's hair was dark. The following week, I went to Muller's apartment and left a pair of underwear among his underwear. We wear very different styles. I knew he was mine when he left work at lunchtime one day. I followed him to his apartment. He stopped, carefully walked up the stairs, and entered his apartment. A minute later, he left and returned to his workplace. Gotcha. The next day, I tore off a corner of the condom wrapper and left it on the floor by the bed. I pulled the blanket up, jumped up and down in the middle of the bed a little to disturb the sheets, and put the blanket back almost exactly the way it was. I also left imprints of 2 glasses on the coffee table, some ash in the toilet, and a running ceiling fan. I took another porcelain bauble, broke it, and threw it in the trash. I grabbed a rare bottle of wine from the shelf, chose the one with the most dust on it, opened it, poured it down the drain, and left the empty one in the trash. This was my grand finale. That evening, my phone rang. It was my youngest, Tess. "Daddy, Daddy, you have to do something," she screamed. "Everything for you, darling," I said. "Help, Mom," she said, barely holding back her sobs. "She's at the police station. This guy hit her, and she called the police. She has nowhere to go. She doesn't want to go back there anymore. He's been getting pretty violent lately," and she said, "Hold on, darling." I interrupted her. "I'm not the person who can help your mother. I hate her to the core, and I have to admit that I really like what happens to her. Not the beating, but the complete fiasco with her boy toy. What's happening around? Dad, Tess begged. She is my mother and she needs help. Good. It's only because you ask, I said. Don't expect me to do anything more than just pick her up and drop her off. Thank you, Dad. A few minutes later, I was at the police station. She was still under interrogation. So I had to wait a little, but I sent her a note telling her I was waiting for her. I have to admit, an hour later I felt terrible when I saw Martha with a bruise on her left eye. She burst into tears when she saw me, walking towards me with open arms. I struggled with myself, but was able to reach out my arms to keep her at arm's length. Hey, I'm here because my daughter asked me to come, I said. Never think that we will become friends. I'll give you a ride wherever you want, that's all. I walked out of the police station without looking back to see if she was following me, her sobs the only sign that she was nearby. Once in the car, I asked, "Where do you want to go?" "Home," she answered. Without saying a word, I drove to my destination. Martha only reacted when I turned onto Miller Street and parked in front of the house. "I don't want to go there," she said, holding back tears. "Listen, Muller is in prison now. This leaves you plenty of time to pack your things and leave." She looked at me for a few seconds, then got out of the car and headed into the apartment. Soon she began taking out trash bags with her clothes. She didn't take much when she left me, so she finished it quickly. As soon as she finished, we left. A few minutes later, she asked where we were going. I heard the fear in her voice. "We're going to see your father," I told her. "You said you wanted to go home. You have no other home." We drove in silence for a few more minutes. Her father lives far away in the suburbs. "I didn't have the opportunity to apologize to you," Martha said, breaking the silence. "I regret what I did. I was stupid and you caught me cheating. I accept it. But I never stopped loving you. I just forgot what it meant for a while. I didn't even want to live with Steve. We had little in common. I want to tell you that I'm sorry for hurting you." I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. Could I have said, "It's no big deal"? In any case, could I tell her that I forgive her? That would be a lie, since I still resented the way she ruined our marriage. I fell silent. I think my silence hurt her more than any rant I could have made to let her know how much she had hurt me. I still couldn't understand how you could swear your love to a man and then hurt him so seriously. Outside her father's house, Martha looked at me. "What will I tell my father?" she asked. It left me speechless. What the fuck? We were divorced for several months, and she didn't tell her father. "You've got to be kidding me," I said. "Harvey doesn't know we're divorced?" "Well, I just told him that we had problems," Martha said. "Now you're definitely in trouble," I replied. "Find a good reason, but don't make me the bad guy. Otherwise, I'll hear about it and tell him the truth." It was already late, but I did not offer to help Martha move things to her father's house. First of all, I enjoyed her suffering a little. Secondly, I didn't want to talk to Harvey. The next day, I parked across the street from Muller's house. He returned home shortly before noon. It's time to put the final nail in the coffin of their flirtation. I grabbed the cheapest bottle of Chilean wine I'd bought on the way, a $10 investment, and walked up the stairs. Muller opened the door and was surprised when he recognized me. "Hello," I said. "We've never met, but I'm Frank McKay, Martha Sharp's ex-husband. I offered him a bottle of wine and he took it. Here, take this so you know I'm not a freeloader." "This will replace the other bottle of wine I threw away," I said. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out a key, the key to his apartment. I gave it to him. "Oh, I won't need that either." Martha moved out last night. I smiled the whole way to my car. I was in high spirits knowing that Mueller would regret losing his $900 bottle of Chateau Montelena more than losing Martha. I had a spring in my step. Revenge can be so sweet. I think I can move on now that I burned that bitch. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.